This is option number one. Option number two is joining an existing vCenter. You're not deploying a vCenter during deployment, but you will join an existing one. This can be done when you have an existing vCenter. And this existing vCenter can be, as described before, a VxRail-Managed vCenter. So this is on the right-hand side, my existing VxRail cluster with its VxRail-Managed vCenter. I'm going to deploy a new cluster and use my existing vCenter. Please keep in mind that in this specific design, whenever you upgrade the environment, you always start with this cluster first, this one next. Okay? Whenever there is an upgrade, you can never start with the newly deployed cluster. You always start with the one that includes vCenter. So vCenter will always run a similar or newer version of the software compared to the clusters it is managing. Okay? So similar to the previous option, this will have a non-transferable license because it's a VxRail managed vCenter. You're going to use VxRail software for upgrading everything. Does not support vCenter HA. It uses the existing non-customizable single sign-on domain. This one requires, however, an external DNS. Since the vCenter is not a VxRail managed vCenter, to the cluster you are deploying to the new cluster, you need a DNS to exist already, which must be external only. And it supports a new VxRail deployed or an existing VDS. So let's imagine that in your existing cluster, you have, for example, here I have VDS1 that I use to deploy my cluster. If I'm deploying a new cluster, I can either use the existing VDS or I can build a VDS2 specifically for my cluster. It all depends on the network design. This is something that must be discussed with your networking engineers. So typically, if the physical networks are separated, physically separated, you may need to deploy a new VDS. Okay. The third option is to use an existing customer-supplied vCenter. So this means that your vCenter is already deployed somewhere. It's not a VxRail managed vCenter. It's just a vCenter you already have in your environment, and it has room to deploy additional clusters. With this vCenter, you have a lot more flexibility in terms of how it gets configured because it's completely independent from VxRail. So you can basically use a custom single sign-on domain. It supports vCenter HA. It requires an external DNS, and you can use either a new VDS deployed with this new VxRail cluster or use the existing VDS in your vCenter. But this type of vCenter will also come with some challenges. So first of all, since it's completely external, it must be licensed accordingly. So this must have a license, separated purchase. The second effort required by you as a customer is the upgrade. The upgrade of this vCenter is completely independent from VxRail. So it must be upgraded using the regular procedure from VMware. Okay, and it must run a software version which is equivalent or higher to the software running in VxRail. We have a compatibility matrix document available online that will tell you exactly what's the minimum vCenter version that you need based on the VxRail software you are running in your environment. So this means that from a management point of view, you need to upgrade your cluster separately from vCenter. Each one of these must be upgraded using a different procedure, which is more effort for you as an admin. So these are the different options to deploy vCenter. There are a couple of questions here which are unfortunately already answered because I'm using the online version of the course. So the question here is telling you that an organization has a VxRail cluster with a VxRail-Managed vCenter. The admin is trying to add non-VxRail hosts to the virtual data center to create a cluster. So you have an existing VxRail cluster, okay? So this is your existing VxRail cluster with embedded vCenter, okay? And you are trying to add, these are non-VxRail nodes. You are trying to add them using simply a regular procedure. Right click, add host, and follow the procedure. Will that work? Well, the answer is yes. Simply yes. It's just a VxXI host. Since you are using vCenter, it's gonna work. But you will be violating the vCenter license agreement because you are running an embedded vCenter or a VxRail-Managed vCenter, which comes with a license that is supposed to be used to only manage VxRail nodes. So technically, it's going to work. Okay. Any questions about what we covered so far? Okay. No questions? All right. Okay, so let's have our first morning break. It's going to be 14 minutes from now. So we will come back at 35 passes of deploying vCenter. Now, we also have networking to enable communication between each one of these components. So the servers need to talk to each other, and they need to talk to vCenter, need to talk to the VxRail manager. So from a network point of view, we have physical components, and the physical components are made of the network cards available in each one of the nodes. Okay, so this is the network card. It's this one. These are the ports for the network card. This is the NIC. Okay, and this port here is actually iDirect port. Let me choose another color. So the port here is iDirect. Okay, so for management switch, we will connect iDirect like this. And for everything else, we will connect the network card built into each one of the nodes. So 2 TOR switches, 1 management switch, 1 gigabit, and network cards, certain number of network cards. For network cards, you have different options. Most basic one, I would say, is using an integrated network card only. Each and every VxRail node will come with an integrated network card. That integrated network card will have 1 or basically 2 or 4 network ports. Depending on what kind of cluster you are deploying, if it's an all-flash cluster, you must have a minimum of 10 gigabit. That's the minimum for deploying all-flash. If you are deploying hybrid, I'm gonna explain the difference between hybrid and all-flash later. We will talk about vSAN. So for hybrid, you can build a cluster with a minimum of 1 gigabit. But keep in mind that with 1 gigabit network never seen that in the production environment, by the way. With a 1 gigabit network, you're going to be limited to 8 nodes only. So most people will go for 10 gigabits or 25 for good performance. So you can have an integrated card only, but that card will be considered as a single point of failure. Because if you have only one integrated card, you can connect it to your 2 port switches. If one port fails, you can continue to communicate using the remaining port. If one switch fails or a cable fails, you have redundancy. But if the integrated card itself fails as a single component, that's a single point of failure. It's going to disconnect the node. So you may want to add a second network card, which is in the form of a PCI Express card. The number of PCI Express cards that you can add to each VxRail node will depend on the architecture of the node itself. Some nodes have room for up to 3 or more additional PCI Express cards. And as you can see, this is an example of a 1U server. Some VxRail nodes are 1U, some others are 2U. So this one, for instance, has two network cards, one with 4 ports and the second one with 2 ports. So typically in this case, we will have redundant uplinks for each traffic. So if you think about vSAN, for example, it's going to, let's imagine that these are our 2 Tor switches. Okay, this is Tor 1, Tor 2. So we will have for our vSAN traffic, for example, it will be active on this link and it's going to be standby on this link. Okay, so by doing this, we have redundancy at any level. So if I lose a port, I can continue to uplink using the remaining port. Okay, if I lose the card itself, I can continue to uplink using the second card. If I lose a Tor switch or a cable, I can continue to uplink. So that was a look at the physical components. We also have virtual components, which is basically the configuration of the network from a virtualization point of view. And this is how it looks like. Okay, so we're going to be using a virtual distributed switch. Those of you not familiar with it, I'm not going to go into details, but basically, a virtual distributed switch is a switch that you create at vCenter server level, and it's going to be used for each one of the hosts. There is like a hidden copy of it available within each one of the hosts. By doing this, you're going to have the same configuration running across your entire environment. In distributed virtual switches, we will have a certain number of port groups, or to be more precise, we're going to be using distributed port groups and uplinks. So in this example, we have a typical VxRail virtual distributed switch configuration, and it's made of 6 distributed port groups. So we have the usual suspects: vMotion, vSAN, your production traffic, one or more, and then you have some other traffics. So management is also something really normal that you should find in any environment, and you have something specific to VxRail. Here, for instance, we have each traffic uplinking to the 2 Tor switches using 2 ports. When you have a network card with 4 ports, each 2 ports will be used in a NIC team to build some sort of redundancy. So what are these traffics? Let's start with the easiest one that we can identify here. So first one is simply vSAN. So this is the vSAN traffic used for your storage. Next, we have vMotion, used for simply vMotion, migrate VMs. These two are tagged traffics. So we use VLANs for traffic segmentation, and we're going to have a VLAN ID assigned to each one of these port groups. The guest VM is your production network. You may have one or more. Okay, this is just going to be used to uplink from your different VMs. Next, we have management. This is your regular management network to talk to the hosts. We call it in VxRail external management network. You may have guessed, since it's called external, we're going to have an internal management network. And that internal management network is this one. It has different names. It can be called internal management or simply discovery. Okay. This one uses VLAN ID 3939 by default. So what is this? This is actually, so first one is your external management network, which is available in any vSphere environment. The internal management or discovery is a specific network to VxRail. It is used for discovery in day one, so we can detect the nodes and build the cluster. And then on day two, when you want to add additional nodes, it's also used to detect the nodes. This network uses by default IPv6. And this is the way